Hi, welcome to Fat Daniel's Barbecue. Today I'm going to be cooking pulled pork. Now, pulled meats have become quite fashionable recently, but if you go to the supermarket or some barbecue restaurants, you'll find that what you get is shredded meat in a sweet, syrupy sauce. Now that really isn't pulled pork or chicken as far as I'm concerned. Properly pulled meat should be moist and succulent without sauce, and I'm going to show you my way of doing it. Right here I've got what they call a pork butt, which strangely isn't from the rump of the animal, it's actually from the shoulder. In fact, just here you can see the shoulder blade bone. This has been beautifully prepared for me by my friends at Chapman's Butchers, and I've got a minimal fat cap on this. If yours comes with the skin on it, you want to take that off and leave no more than about 1/4 of an inch of fat on there. This is absolutely perfect. So the first thing I'm going to do, because this is going to shrink and get to fall apart tenderness as we cook it, I'm going to wrap it or tie it so that everything holds together as we cook. Right, so with the pork all nicely tied up, the next thing we need to talk about is injection. Some people don't feel the need. Some people like to inject with apple juice, others with cider vinegar, some even like to use bourbon. Now I think bourbon gives things a lovely kick, but I also find that it's a bit strong on its own, so I like to use a blend of bourbon and apple juice, which I've got here in my syringe. So whether or not you choose to inject is entirely up to you. It's just adding an extra layer of flavour. Right, so that's that injected. Next thing we need to talk about is the rub. Now I'm going to be using my Fat Daniel's Dixie Dust all-purpose seasoning and my barbecue rub. We're going to need a binder to help that stick. Now for some people that's something simple like an olive oil. Great, fine, no problem with that. Others like to use barbecue sauce. Others will use something like a mustard, ketchup, or even a hot sauce. I'm a fan of using an American yellow mustard. I find it doesn't add a strong flavour, but it lends a warmth to the meat after it's cooked, so that's perfect. So I'm going to rub that nicely, flip it over and do the other side. It really is just something to help your rubs stick to your meat. So, with that on, I'm now going to give it a rub. Now don't be shy, this is a big piece of meat, and what you're really looking for here is a bark when you've finished, so when it finishes cooking. So you can be as generous as you like with this stuff. It's all flavour. Now, some people like to rub their rubs in. Personally, I find that's counterproductive. I just like to pat it into place. I find that gives a much better result. Now, with that lovely piece of meat given a generous and liberal coating of rub, it's about ready to go into the smoker. Next thing we need to talk about is which way up to put it. Now, there are two schools of thought really. One says that the fat cap should go on the top, so as it cooks the fat renders down, runs through into the meat and keeps it moist. Now, that's a good idea. I'm not sure actually how true that is, and with a joint like this which has got so much intramuscular fat, really it will be beautifully moist without it. The other school of thought says that you use the fat cap as a shield against the heat. So if you're using a barbecue using the indirect method, gas or charcoal, you really want that fat cap facing down because the heat's coming from largely from underneath. If you're using an offset smoker with the heat's coming along and over the top, you're going to want the fat cap on the top just to prevent the meat from burning and cooking too much. So I'm going to be cooking today on my pellet grill, which is essentially an offset smoker, but as the firebox is actually down below, I'm going to cook that fat cap down. So I'm going to pop it into the smoker, and I'm looking for a cooking temperature of 105, 110 degrees centigrade. That's about 225, 230 Fahrenheit. And a joint like this is going to take anything from 8 to 12 hours. Now, you might ask, why such a large window? That's because something like this is going to suffer from what they call the stall or the plateau. Now, what happens with that is that initially the internal temperature of the meat starts to rise, as you'd expect, but after 3 or 4 hours it levels off and you can sit for hours without the temperature going up at all. In fact, the internal temperature may even go down. Now, this is because the moisture inside the meat starts to evaporate and cool the meat as it does so. So you've got heat coming in trying to warm it up and the evaporation taking place in the meat, and the two cancel each other out. So, you know, it's nothing to worry about, it's perfectly normal, and it can last for up to 4 hours. So there you are, nice and simple, nice and straightforward. We're just going to pop it in the smoker, job's done. So nothing more to do but get this little thing cooking, and we'll come back to it in a few hours time. Right, well, I know I said this was going to take 8 to 12 hours, but in actual fact, here we are a little over 20 hours after I first put it on the smoker, having hit that marvellous internal temperature of 95 centigrade, 203 Fahrenheit, so it's all good. Yeah, took a long time, but as you can see, it's going to be worth it. Now, this sort of temperature, this sort of cooking time is not unheard of, although it is obviously longer than I originally planned. So top tip, if you're going to cook pulled pork for an event, family barbecue or something like that, make sure you allow plenty of time for it to cook, because it can always take longer than you expect. So, could I have made it any faster? Yes. I could have waited till I got to the temperature range of the stall, which is sort of 65 to 76, 150 to 170 Fahrenheit, and wrapped it either in foil or in butcher's paper. That would have sped the cooking time up a lot, but obviously with the meat wrapped it would have steamed in its own juices and this marvellous bark would have gone quite soft and soggy. Horses for courses, I chose to let this thing go unwrapped. So all that's left to do now is to cut the string off and pull our pork. So here I'm going to shred this with some bear claws. You don't need to use these. A pair of forks would do, just like when they're shredding your duck in a Chinese restaurant. But these were a present from my sister-in-law Martha. Thank you, Martha. So I'm going to use these. And really all you have to do is just pull this meat apart. And look at that, you can see it's just falling apart tender. Now, here's the test of a good piece of pulled pork. Let's look at that. Clean as a whistle, and it has to be said, very hot. Now this is what pulled pork is really all about. Look at that. Shreds of tender, juicy, succulent pork. All we really need now is to load some of this up onto a bun with our favourite sides. Maybe a slaw or some pickles and a splash of our favourite barbecue sauce. And this will be absolutely delicious. Right, well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you're kept abreast of any new videos that we post. And we'll see you again next time at Fat Daniel's Barbecue.